A racist publisher publicly humiliates a black author, not knowing he's a best-selling writer. Darnell Hayes stared at the email on his screen, the cursor blinking incessantly at the end of the words that just moments ago had ignited a flicker of excitement in his chest. An invitation to speak at the prestigious Westwood Literary Festival had landed in his inbox, a chance to showcase his work and share the stage with some of the industry's most respected names. Yet as he read the name of the headliner, Roger Bennett, his excitement morphed into a knot of anxiety in his stomach. "Darnell, you've worked hard for this," he muttered to himself, running a hand through his closely cropped hair. "You deserve it." But the thought of Roger Bennett, the notorious publisher known for his scathing comments about black authors, loomed like a storm cloud over his moment of triumph. Darnell had heard the whispers, the backroom conversations about how Bennett believed black voices were not marketable. The irony of being invited to share a stage with someone who had publicly belittled writers like him gnawed at Darnell's nerves. He leaned back in his chair and took a deep breath, staring at the ceiling as he sought clarity. This could be a chance to change the narrative, he thought, envisioning the potential impact of his words. Darnell had always believed in the power of storytelling, in its ability to bridge divides and foster understanding. But could he stand up to Roger Bennett? His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a text from his best friend, Andre, who had been a constant source of support throughout Darnell's writing journey. "Andre, you heard about the festival? You're gonna crush it. Just be yourself." Darnell chuckled, grateful for Andre's unwavering confidence. He typed a quick reply, his fingers flying over the screen. "Darnell, yeah, but I'll be sharing the stage with Roger Bennett. Not sure how I feel about that." "Andre, forget about him. You're a best-selling author now. Show him what you're made of." Darnell smiled. Andre always had a way of lifting his spirits, but as the excitement of the invitation settled, the weight of the impending confrontation with Roger loomed larger. Darnell had recently found success under the pseudonym Jake Marshall, but would revealing his true identity bring the validation he craved, or would it only expose him to more ridicule? The days leading up to the festival passed in a blur of rehearsals and self-doubt. Darnell practiced his speech in front of the mirror, trying to perfect his delivery while mentally prepping for Roger's inevitable jabs. He wanted to be ready, to respond with poise instead of letting anger dictate his words. "You can do this," he whispered to himself, adjusting his glasses and straightening the collar of his shirt. The day of the festival arrived, bright and crisp, and Darnell found himself surrounded by a sea of faces, all eager to hear the voices of the literary elite. He walked through the venue, taking in the grandeur, the plush seating, the ornate decorations, and the buzz of anticipation. Darnell's heart raced as he navigated the crowd, exchanging polite nods with fellow authors and industry professionals. He felt a mixture of pride and apprehension, his mind swirling with thoughts of what was to come. As he approached the panel stage, he spotted Roger Bennett, sitting confidently at the center, surrounded by other authors. Roger's presence was commanding, his reputation as a ruthless critic palpable in the air. "He doesn't even know who I am," Darnell thought bitterly, bitterness twisting in his gut as he took his seat at the far end of the table. He could hear Roger's laughter echoing through the room as he regaled the audience with stories from his career, each anecdote dripping with condescension. Darnell leaned forward, bracing himself for the moment he would have to confront the man who represented everything wrong with the industry. The panel began, and Roger took the lead. "Literature is a reflection of our society, and I refuse to promote works that lack depth," he declared, his tone dripping with disdain. The audience nodded, a mix of admiration and agreement rippling through the crowd. Darnell clenched his fists under the table, fighting the urge to speak up. Roger continued, "Too many authors today think they can write just because they've experienced some hardship. It's not that simple." Darnell's heart pounded in his chest. Each word Roger uttered felt like a personal attack, a dismissal of the very essence of his work. He glanced at the other panelists, their expressions a mix of discomfort and resignation. This is it, Darnell thought, wrestling with the dilemma that had plagued him for days. Should he remain silent and allow Roger to demean him and his craft, or should he take a stand and risk everything? As the panel progressed, Darnell's internal battle raged on. He could feel the weight of his ancestors' struggles pressing down on him, urging him to speak out, The moment felt pivotal, and he knew he had to make a decision before it was too late. Darnell's thoughts raced as he listened to Roger's voice drone on, a cascade of dismissive remarks washing over him. The man's arrogance felt suffocating, and Darnell could see the audience hanging on to every word, nodding in agreement as Roger painted a narrow picture of what constituted a worthy literary voice. Each nod felt like a jab, each laugh at Roger's quips a reminder of the uphill battle Darnell had faced throughout his career. You should be grateful for the opportunity, Darnell thought bitterly, recalling the countless times he had submitted his manuscripts only to receive rejection letters that cited a lack of market appeal. It wasn't just his work that was being dissected. It was his identity, his very existence as a Black author, that Roger seemed so eager to invalidate. The panel was now opening up for questions, and Darnell could feel the tension in the air thickening. He had spent years honing his craft, pouring his heart into stories that reflected his experiences. But would any of that matter here today? The audience was filled with aspiring writers and established professionals, but the presence of Roger loomed largest, a specter of doubt that threatened to overshadow everything Darnell had accomplished. A woman in the audience raised her hand, her voice clear as she addressed the panel. What do you think about the importance of diverse voices in literature? Darnell leaned in, hoping that this would be the moment he could lend his own voice to the conversation. Roger's response, however, was swift and cutting. Diversity is great, but only if it adds value to the narrative. Many authors of color lack the depth that truly resonates with a broad audience. The audience murmured in agreement, and Darnell felt his heart sink. He took a deep breath, feeling the heat rising in his cheeks. It was now or never. He had to confront Roger, to stand up not just for himself, but for all the voices that had been silenced. As the next question was posed, Darnell's mind was made up. He would not allow another moment to pass without speaking his truth. He raised his hand, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. I'd like to respond to that. Roger's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing his face. Oh, you have something to add? His tone was patronizing, and Darnell could feel the tension in the room shift, a collective breath being held as everyone turned to watch. Yes, I do. Darnell's voice rang out, steady and clear. As a Black author, I can tell you that our stories are not just about hardship. They're about resilience, joy, and the complexity of our experiences. To dismiss the depth of our narratives is to ignore the richness of human experience. The audience shifted, and Darnell felt a spark of hope. He continued, each story carries the weight of our history, our culture, and our dreams. To say that Black authors lack depth is to erase the very essence of what we bring to the table. Roger scoffed, clearly unprepared for Darnell's rebuttal. And what makes you think your perspective is universally relatable? He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms, a smirk playing on his lips. Because humanity is universal. Darnell shot back, his heart racing. We all experience love, loss, joy, and pain. My story is a reflection of that universal truth, and I believe it resonates with readers, regardless of their background. A murmur of agreement rippled through the audience, and Darnell felt a rush of adrenaline. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the opportunity to reclaim his narrative. Roger's demeanor shifted, and for the first time, uncertainty flickered across his face. Well, if that's the case, why don't you share with us your latest work? He asked, feigning interest. Darnell took a deep breath, aware that this was his chance to reveal his identity. I'd be happy to, he said, but first let me clarify that I write under the name Jake Marshall. I've had the privilege of becoming a best-selling author. The room went silent. Darnell watched as realization dawned on Roger's face, the color draining from his cheeks. The audience shifted, their eyes flitting between Darnell and Roger, the tension in the air palpable. You're Jake Marshall? Roger asked, incredulity dripping from his words. The author who... Yes, Darnell interjected, standing tall. The author you just dismissed and ridiculed. The author whose work you deemed unworthy. A wave of recognition swept through the audience, and Darnell could feel the tide turning. Murmurs of surprise and admiration filled the air as he continued. I've sold thousands of copies, and my stories are resonating with readers across the globe. I'm here to tell you that our voices matter, that our experiences are valid, and that we are more than capable of creating literature that speaks to the human condition. Roger opened his mouth to respond, but the audience was no longer on his side. "You've lost touch with what literature should be about, Roger," Darnell said, his voice unwavering. "It's not about gatekeeping, it's about storytelling that connects us all. I'm not here to seek your approval, but I refuse to let you define what is worthy." The applause erupted like a thunderclap, drowning out Roger's protests. Darnell stood there, feeling a swell of pride and relief wash over him. The moment had shifted, he had turned the tide, and in doing so, he had ignited a conversation that had been sorely needed in the literary world. As he sat back down, Darnell's heart raced. The high of speaking his truth surged through him, and he could see the faces in the audience, some nodding, others smiling in support. He felt an overwhelming sense of connection, a shared understanding that resonated deeply within him. With each passing moment, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Roger's arrogance had faltered, the veneer of confidence cracking under the weight of Darnell's words. The panel continued, but the dynamic had changed. Questions began to pour in, not directed solely at Roger, but at Darnell, seeking his insights and experiences as a Black author. "What inspired you to write under a pseudonym?" asked a young woman, her eyes bright with curiosity. Darnell smiled, thankful for the chance to share his journey. "I chose a pseudonym to navigate the industry in a way that felt safe. I wanted to see if my stories could stand on their own, without the biases that often come with my name. But now I realize the importance of owning my identity and my voice." The conversation flowed, and Darnell found himself sharing anecdotes from his writing process, the challenges he faced, and the triumphs that followed. He spoke passionately, feeling the energy in the room shift to a place of respect and admiration. But as the panel drew to a close, Darnell knew this moment would not be the end. He had opened a door, and now it was up to him to walk through it. The audience had rallied behind him, and Roger's disdainful persona had been laid bare. With the applause still ringing in his ears, Darnell felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had not only defended himself, but had also stood up for countless others whose stories had been marginalized. And as he left the stage, the weight of his ancestors' struggles felt lighter, replaced by the knowledge that he had made a difference. The applause from the audience echoed in Darnell Hayes' ears like a triumphant anthem as he stepped off the stage. He was still riding the high of his confrontation with Roger Bennett, adrenaline coursing through his veins. The murmurs of admiration and respect from the audience felt like a warm embrace, a validation he had longed for throughout his career. But as he made his way through the backstage area, the reality of what had just happened began to settle in. "What did I just do?" Darnell thought, his heart racing. The exhilaration was quickly replaced by a flurry of anxiety. He had revealed his true identity, and while the crowd had rallied behind him in that moment, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had opened a Pandora's box. The fallout from this confrontation could be monumental, both for his career and for the industry at large. As Darnell walked down the hall, he felt a mix of pride and trepidation. He could hear snippets of conversations from fellow authors who had witnessed the panel, their voices filled with excitement and admiration. "Did you see how he stood up to Roger?" one woman exclaimed. "That was incredible." Darnell rounded a corner and spotted Andre waiting for him. A wide grin plastered across his face. Andre rushed forward, pulling Darnell into a bear hug. "You were amazing. I can't believe you did that. You took him down." Darnell laughed, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease. "It just happened, man. I couldn't let him get away with that, but now I'm worried about the backlash." "Backlash? Are you kidding? You just made a name for yourself," Andre replied, his enthusiasm infectious. "People are going to want to hear more from you. This could be the turning point in your career." Darnell appreciated Andre's optimism, but the reality of the publishing industry weighed heavily on his mind. He had seen how quickly public opinion could shift, especially when it came to a figure as polarizing as Roger Bennett. If Roger retaliated, it could jeopardize everything Darnell had worked for. "What if he tries to discredit me?" Darnell said, running a hand through his hair. "What if he tells the publishers to drop my books?" "Then you fight back," Andre said firmly. "You have a voice now, and you need to use it. You've already shown you can stand up to him. Don't let fear dictate your next move." As they spoke, Darnell noticed a group of authors gathering around the venue entrance, animatedly discussing the panel. He felt a surge of pride. He had sparked something in them. They were all eager to share their stories, to lend their voices to a conversation that had been silenced for too long. But amidst the excitement, Darnell's phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him back to reality. He pulled it out and saw a notification from social media. Breaking: controversy at Westwood Literary Festival. Roger Bennett versus Darnell Hayes. His stomach dropped as he clicked on the link. The article detailed the panel confrontation, highlighting Roger's dismissive remarks and Darnell's bold response. Comments flooded in, ranging from praise to skepticism. Some readers celebrated Darnell's bravery, while others questioned his ability to write meaningful literature just because he had stood up to an established figure. "Here it comes," Darnell muttered, anxiety creeping back in. Andre leaned over, glancing at the screen. "Don't let this get to you. You're going to get both sides of the spectrum. Just keep doing what you do best." Darnell nodded, but the weight of the comments pressed heavily on his mind. The industry was fickle, and while he had gained a temporary spotlight, the shadows of doubt still lurked. That evening, Darnell returned to his hotel room, mentally drained but reflective. He plopped down on the bed and stared at the ceiling, replaying the day's events in his mind. The confrontation was a victory, but the battle was far from over. He needed to prepare for the fallout, to strategize his next steps. He opened his laptop and began to type, his fingers flying across the keyboard as he drafted a statement for his social media accounts. He wanted to acknowledge the support he had received, while also addressing the criticisms head-on. "I am proud of my work, and I am proud to be a Black author. My voice matters, and I will continue to fight for representation in literature," he typed, feeling a surge of determination with each word. As he crafted his message, he couldn't shake the feeling that the confrontation with Roger was just the beginning. In the days that followed, he knew he would need to leverage the momentum he had gained to challenge the systemic issues within the publishing industry. Darnell's phone buzzed again, interrupting his thoughts. It was a text from Andre. "Andre, you're trending on social media. People are talking about you." Darnell's heart raced as he opened the app again, scrolling through the that had exploded since the panel. He saw threads discussing his confrontation, authors sharing their own experiences of discrimination in the industry. Many expressed support, rallying around the idea that literature needed to be more inclusive. But then he spotted a tweet from Roger's official account. "In light of today's events, it's clear some authors confuse noise with substance. Writing is an art, and not everyone can grasp that." The comments stung, and Darnell felt a surge of anger wash over him. Roger was attempting to dismiss him, to undermine the very validity of his work. Darnell's fingers hovered over the keyboard as he contemplated his response. Should he engage, or would it be better to rise above the provocations? "This is a chess game," he muttered to himself. "I can't let him bait me." Instead, he decided to focus on positivity. Darnell typed a response to his supporters instead, thanking them for their encouragement and vowing to continue fighting for diverse voices in literature. He hit send and felt a weight lift from his shoulders, knowing he had made the right choice. The next day, Darnell found himself inundated with messages and notifications. His inbox was flooded with requests for interviews, articles, and podcasts. The literary community was buzzing, and he was at the center of it. "You're going to be a star," Andre said, grinning as they met for breakfast. "This is your moment, Darnell. You need to seize it." Darnell smiled, but the pressure was mounting. He hadn't anticipated the rapid response from the community, and while he was grateful for the attention, he felt the weight of expectation settle heavily on his shoulders. "I just hope I can handle it," Darnell admitted, swirling his coffee. "What if I can't live up to it?" "You already have," Andre replied, his tone serious. "You stood up to one of the biggest names in the industry. You have a unique perspective, and people want to hear your story. Just be yourself." Darnell appreciated Andre's faith in him, but self-doubt still lingered. He had spent years perfecting his craft, but now he felt thrust into a spotlight he had never sought. As they finished breakfast, Darnell's phone chimed again, this time an email from a major literary magazine requesting an interview. He read through it, excitement mixed with apprehension. They wanted to discuss his confrontation with Roger, his writing journey, and the importance of representation in literature. "This is it," Darnell said, looking up at Andre. "This could be my chance to really make a difference." "Exactly. This is your opportunity to expand the conversation," Andre encouraged. "Don't overthink it. Just speak from your heart." Darnell nodded, feeling a flicker of determination ignite within him. He agreed to the interview and spent the rest of the day preparing for it, jotting down notes and key points he wanted to address. That afternoon, Darnell arrived at the magazine's office, his nerves tingling with anticipation. The interior was sleek and modern, a stark contrast to the cozy coffee shops where he usually held meetings. As he was led to the interview room, he could hear the faint sound of laughter and chatter from the staff, a reminder that he was stepping into a world that had often felt closed off to him. The interviewer, a poised woman named Lisa, greeted him warmly. "Thank you for coming, Darnell. We're excited to hear your thoughts on everything that's happened." They settled into their chairs, and Darnell took a deep breath, centering himself. "I appreciate the opportunity," he said, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him. "The past few days have been a whirlwind, but it's been incredible to see so many voices coming together." Lisa nodded, her eyes bright with interest. "Let's dive in. Your confrontation with Roger Bennett has sparked a lot of conversations. How did it feel to stand up to someone of his stature?" Darnell paused, reflecting on the emotions that had surged through him during that pivotal moment. Lisa leaned in, her interest piqued. "Many people have praised your bravery, but there are also critics who argue that confronting Roger could have negative repercussions for your career. How do you respond to that?" Darnell felt a flicker of frustration but quickly tempered it with resolve. "Criticism is part of the territory, but I'd rather face backlash for standing up for what I believe in than remain silent and complicit. The publishing industry needs to change, and that starts with having uncomfortable conversations." Lisa nodded thoughtfully. "That's a powerful stance. What do you see as the next steps for you and for the industry as a whole?" Darnell took a moment to gather his thoughts. "For me personally, I want to continue writing stories that resonate with readers. I want to create more platforms for diverse voices, to uplift those who have been overlooked. As for the industry, it needs to embrace diversity not just in its authors, but in its editorial boards, marketing teams, and decision-makers. It's time to dismantle the barriers that have kept so many talented writers from being heard." The conversation flowed naturally, and Darnell felt himself growing more comfortable. He spoke passionately about his experiences, sharing anecdotes from his journey as a Black author in a predominantly white industry. Each story felt like a piece of armor he was donning, each revelation empowering him further. As the interview drew to a close, Lisa smiled warmly. "Thank you for being so candid, Darnell. I think your story will resonate with many readers. It's inspiring to see someone take a stand." "Thank you for giving me the platform," Darnell replied, feeling a swell of gratitude. As they wrapped up, Lisa handed him a business card. "If you ever want to talk again or have something to share, please reach out. We'd love to have you back." Darnell accepted the card, a sense of accomplishment washing over him. He had faced his fears, shared his truth, and perhaps even sparked a larger conversation. As he left the magazine's office, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. But as the days unfolded, the aftermath of his confrontation with Roger began to reveal its complexities. Darnell's social media had exploded, and while many celebrated his bravery, others sought to undermine his achievements. He received messages from trolls questioning his talent, dismissing his work as typical for a Black author. "Just ignore them," Andre advised over lunch one day, his tone casual as he scrolled through Darnell's notifications. "You can't please everyone." Darnell nodded, but the negativity gnawed at him. "It's hard not to let it get to me. I've worked so hard to get here, and it feels like some people want to strip that away." "You're not defined by their opinions," Andre insisted. "Remember why you write. Focus on those who support you, the ones whose lives you're changing with your stories." Determined to shake off the doubts, Darnell decided to channel his energy into his writing. He spent long hours at his laptop, crafting new stories that reflected the complexities of his identity and experiences. He envisioned characters who, like him, navigated a world that often dismissed their worth. But as he delved deeper into his work, he couldn't ignore the looming presence of Roger Bennett. Darnell's phone buzzed with notifications from literary news outlets, each one recapping the fallout from the festival. Roger had issued a statement attempting to downplay the incident and reinforce his position in the industry. "Darnell Hayes is a promising author, but one moment of bravado does not equate to literary merit," Roger had said. "Literature requires more than just noise. It demands substance." Darnell felt the anger rise within him again. Roger was trying to erase his accomplishment, to frame the confrontation as a fluke rather than a turning point. But this time, Darnell refused to let it slide. He crafted a carefully worded response, emphasizing the importance of diverse voices and the need for change in the industry. He hit send, feeling a sense of empowerment wash over him. "That's the spirit," Andre exclaimed when he saw the post. "Now let's see how Roger responds," Darnell said, a mix of anticipation and apprehension swirling within him. The following week was a whirlwind of interviews, discussions, and events. Darnell received invitations to speak at various panels and forums, his voice becoming a rallying cry for those seeking representation in literature. He was invigorated by the response, feeling a sense of responsibility to continue advocating for change. But Roger's influence was still palpable. At one industry event, Darnell overheard a group of editors discussing the fallout from the festival. They spoke in hushed tones, their expressions revealing a mix of admiration for Darnell's bravery and reluctance to cross Roger. "He's a powerful man," one editor whispered. "You don't want to get on his bad side." Darnell felt a pang of frustration. Why should anyone have to fear speaking out against prejudice? He moved closer, determined to make his presence known. "Excuse me," Darnell interjected, his voice steady. "I think it's important that we all speak out against discrimination, regardless of who it might upset. If we keep silent, we're complicit." The editors turned to him, surprise etched on their faces. One finally spoke up. "It's not that simple, Darnell. Roger has connections. He could make things difficult for you." "Difficult or just uncomfortable?" Darnell shot back, frustration boiling within him. "We need to ask ourselves what we value more, our comfort or our integrity. If we don't start making waves, nothing will change." His words hung in the air, and for a moment the room fell silent. Darnell felt a flicker of hope as he noticed a few nods of agreement among the group. Perhaps he wasn't alone in this fight after all. The conversations continued, and Darnell found himself at the forefront of a movement. He collaborated with other authors, organizing panels and workshops that focused on representation in literature. They shared their stories and experiences, creating a safe space for those who had felt marginalized. As he immersed himself in this work, Darnell found his writing evolving. He poured his heart into new stories, exploring themes of resilience and identity with renewed vigor. Each narrative became a testament to the struggles faced by Black authors and the beauty that emerged from those struggles. But just as Darnell began to find his footing, a new challenge emerged. An article surfaced online claiming that Darnell had only gained his success through the controversy surrounding his confrontation with Roger. "He's riding the coattails of a moment," the article claimed. "Can he sustain his career without the drama?" Darnell felt a wave of anger wash over him. His hard work and dedication were being undermined once again. But instead of letting it deter him, he channeled that frustration into his writing and activism, determined to prove his worth. One evening, as he sat in his favorite cafe, Darnell received a message from a fellow author. "There's going to be a rally next week to support diverse voices in literature. We'd love for you to speak," the message read. Darnell's heart raced at the thought of being part of something larger than himself. This was an opportunity to amplify his message, to unite with others who felt the same way. "Absolutely," he typed back, feeling the excitement build within him. As the rally approached, Darnell prepared his speech with fervor. He wanted to inspire others, to encourage them to embrace their identities, and to fight for their place in the literary world. The day of the rally arrived, and Darnell stood at the podium, facing a crowd of passionate individuals ready to make their voices heard. "Thank you all for being here today," he began, feeling the energy of the crowd resonate through him. "Today we stand together to celebrate the power of our stories, to demand representation, and to challenge the status quo. Our voices matter, and we will not be silenced." The crowd erupted in applause, and Darnell felt a surge of energy wash over him. This was the moment he had been fighting for, a chance to inspire others and to advocate for change. The rally was electric, and as Darnell Hayes stood at the podium, he felt the energy of the crowd coursing through him. He had spent weeks preparing for this moment, shaping his speech into a powerful call for action, and now it was time to deliver. The sun shone brightly overhead, and the gathered crowd was a tapestry of faces, young and old, diverse and passionate. They were all there for one reason: to advocate for representation in literature and to support marginalized voices. Thank you all for being here today, Darnell began, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through his veins. Today we stand together to celebrate the power of our stories, to demand representation, and to challenge the status quo. Our voices matter, and we will not be silenced. The crowd erupted in applause, and Darnell felt a rush of validation. This was not just about him, it was about everyone who had ever felt overlooked, dismissed, or marginalized in the literary world. He scanned the faces in the audience, recognizing fellow authors, aspiring writers, and activists who had fought similar battles. For too long, the publishing industry has been dominated by a narrow perspective, he continued, his passion igniting as he spoke. We have been told that our stories don't matter, that our experiences aren't relatable. But I stand here today to tell you that our narratives are not just valid, they are essential. They reflect the richness of the human experience. Cheers erupted from the crowd, and Darnell felt his resolve strengthen. He spoke of his own journey, the challenges he had faced, and the courage it took to confront industry giants like Roger Bennett. He shared stories of fellow authors whose voices had been silenced, emphasizing the need for change. We are not just authors, we are storytellers, historians, and advocates for our communities, Darnell declared. Each of us brings a unique perspective that enriches the literary landscape, and together we can demand a seat at the table. As he spoke, Darnell noticed a group of journalists in the front row, their cameras clicking as they captured the moment. He felt a surge of determination. This was an opportunity not just to speak to the crowd, but to reach a wider audience. He needed to ensure that his message resonated beyond the rally. This is about more than just our individual stories, he said, his voice rising with intensity. It's about creating an ecosystem where all voices are heard, where diversity is celebrated, and where literature reflects the true tapestry of our society. We must hold publishers accountable for their choices, for the narratives they choose to amplify, and for the voices they choose to silence. The applause grew louder, and Darnell felt an exhilaration he had never experienced before. It was as if the crowd was feeding off his energy, and he drew strength from their enthusiasm. If we stand united, we can challenge the status quo. We can demand that our stories be told, and we can create a world where every writer, regardless of their background, has the opportunity to share their truth. As he concluded his speech, Darnell's heart raced, and he could see the crowd's eyes shining with hope and determination. Let us be the change we wish to see in the literary world. Together, we can reshape the narrative. The rally erupted into cheers, and Darnell stepped away from the podium, overwhelmed by emotion. He had spoken from his heart, and the response had been beyond anything he could have imagined. As he mingled with the crowd afterward, people approached him to express their gratitude and share their own stories. "You inspired me today," one young woman said, her eyes bright with excitement. "I've always wanted to write, but I didn't think I had a voice." Darnell smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment wash over him. "You have a voice, and it matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The conversations continued, each interaction reinforcing Darnell's belief in the power of storytelling. But as the rally wound down and people began to disperse, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that lurked in the back of his mind. Days turned into weeks, and Darnell's speech at the rally reverberated throughout the literary community. Articles were published and interviews followed. Darnell found himself in demand, invited to speak at various events, podcasts, and forums. While he relished the attention, he also felt the weight of expectation. But the celebration was short-lived. Roger Bennett's influence in the industry was still strong, and Darnell knew that the backlash was coming. It arrived sooner than he expected. One afternoon, while scrolling through social media, Darnell stumbled upon an article from a well-known literary critic. The headline read, "Darnell Hayes, the face of a controversy, not substance." His heart sank as he clicked on the link, the critic's words slicing through him like a knife. While Hayes has generated significant buzz following his confrontation with Roger Bennett, he has yet to prove that he has the literary chops to back it up. His rise to fame appears more about sensationalism than substance. The literary world should be cautious about elevating voices that rely on controversy to gain traction. Darnell felt the heat rise in his cheeks, anger boiling within him. How could someone dismiss his hard work and talent so easily? He had poured his heart into his stories. And to reduce it all to mere controversy felt like a slap in the face. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, throwing his phone onto the couch. Andre walked in, sensing Darnell's frustration. "What's wrong? Did you see this article?" Darnell replied, his voice tight with anger. "They're saying I'm just a product of controversy, that I haven't earned my place." Andre picked up Darnell's phone, reading through the article with a frown. "This is just one person's opinion. You know how critics can be. They thrive on controversy and drama." Darnell shook his head, feeling the weight of the criticism bear down on him. "But it's not just that. Roger's still out there, and he's got connections. What if this article affects my career?" "Look, you've already made waves," Andre said, his tone firm. "You can't let one critic define your worth. You know who you are and what you bring to the table. Keep writing, keep pushing. That's what matters." Darnell took a deep breath, trying to absorb Andre's words. He had fought too hard to let negativity derail him. "You're right, I can't let this get to me." Resolved to move forward, Darnell turned back to his writing. He poured his emotions into his work, channeling his anger and frustration into a new story that reflected the very themes he had been advocating for. Each word felt like a catharsis, a way to reclaim his narrative and silence the critics who sought to diminish his voice. But as he worked, the tension in the industry continued to build. Roger Bennett was not one to back down easily, and Darnell knew that he would retaliate. It didn't take long for that retaliation to come. A few days later, Darnell received an unsettling call from his literary agent. "Darnell, we need to talk," his agent said, the urgency in her voice sending a chill down Darnell's spine. "I just got off the phone with the publishing house. They're considering dropping your next book." Darnell's heart raced. "What? Why?" "Roger has been speaking with some of the higher-ups, expressing concerns about your ability to carry a book after all the controversy. They're worried about sales." Darnell felt the walls closing in. "But my book was already in production. I've worked too hard to let this happen." "I know, and I'm doing everything I can to advocate for you. But Roger has a lot of influence, and they're listening to him." Darnell felt the anger bubbling to the surface again. "He can't just erase my work because he doesn't like me." "I understand, but we need to strategize," his agent replied. "If we can get you in front of the right people, we might be able to turn this around. We need to show them that your voice is valuable, that you're not just a flash in the pan." Darnell nodded, determination igniting within him. He couldn't let Roger's influence dictate his future. "I'm ready to fight for this. I won't let him take it away from me." In the days that followed, Darnell threw himself into preparations for a series of meetings with key figures in the publishing industry. He knew he needed to present himself as not just a voice of controversy, but as a legitimate author with a powerful narrative. He organized his thoughts, crafted a compelling presentation, and prepared to address the concerns head-on. The day of the meetings arrived, and Darnell felt a mix of anxiety and determination. He donned his best suit, a crisp navy blazer that made him feel confident and professional. As he walked into the office of the publishing house, he could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Darnell took a deep breath, steadying himself as he stepped into the conference room. The atmosphere was tense, the air thick with anticipation. As he faced the panel, he felt the weight of their expectations pressing down on him. He began his presentation, recounting his journey as an author, the challenges he had faced, and the significance of his work. He spoke passionately about the necessity of diverse voices in literature and the responsibility of publishers to champion those narratives. As he concluded, he could see the expressions of the panelists shift from skepticism to intrigue. Darnell had made his case, and for the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of hope. They were listening, and he was determined to prove that he was more than just a product of controversy. He was a vital contributor to the literary landscape. The days following Darnell's presentation were a whirlwind of emotion. He had poured his heart into the meeting, and as he awaited the decision from the publishing house, he felt a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Would they see the value in his work, or would Roger Bennett's influence overshadow his accomplishments? Finally, the call came. Darnell paced his apartment, the phone pressed tightly to his ear as his agent delivered the news. "They're going to move forward with your book," she said, her voice a mixture of excitement and relief. "They were impressed by your presentation and your passion. They believe in your voice." Darnell's heart soared. "Really? That's incredible." "Yes, but we still need to navigate the fallout from Roger's comments. They want you to do a series of interviews to help bolster your public image. I'm ready for it, Darnell replied, determination flooding through him. He knew the next steps were crucial, and he was prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. In the following weeks, Darnell became a prominent figure in the literary community. He participated in interviews, panels, and discussions, each opportunity allowing him to amplify his message about representation and inclusivity. He spoke openly about his experiences, the obstacles he had faced, and the importance of supporting diverse voices in literature. The more he spoke, the more he felt the weight of his responsibility. Darnell wasn't just advocating for himself, he was advocating for countless authors who had been dismissed, overlooked, or silenced. He wanted to inspire others to embrace their uniqueness and to recognize the power of their stories. As the buzz surrounding his book grew, so did the scrutiny. Roger Bennett continued to vocalize his disdain, dismissing Darnell's accomplishments as mere publicity stunts. The backlash from Roger's camp was fierce, with some critics questioning Darnell's literary merit. He's only relevant because of the drama, one critic wrote in a scathing review. His work lacks depth and sophistication. Darnell felt the sting of the words, but he refused to let them deter him. Instead, he doubled down on his efforts, using the criticism as fuel to drive him forward. He poured his heart into his writing, crafting stories that resonated with readers and challenged the status quo. One afternoon, as he sat at his favorite cafe, Darnell received an email that would change everything. The subject line read, "Invitation to speak at the National Literary Conference." His heart raced as he opened the message, reading through the details. They wanted him to deliver a keynote speech, addressing the importance of diverse voices in literature and the need for systemic change. This is it, he thought. This could be my chance to make a real impact. Darnell accepted the invitation, and as the date approached, he dedicated himself to preparing the best speech of his life. He wanted to inspire others, to ignite a fire within them to challenge the norms and advocate for change. When the day of the conference arrived, Darnell stood backstage, his heart pounding with anticipation. He could hear the murmur of the crowd, the excitement palpable in the air. As he stepped onto the stage, the applause washed over him, and he felt a surge of energy. "Thank you for that warm welcome," Darnell began, his voice steady as he faced the audience. "Today we gather to celebrate the power of storytelling and the importance of representation in literature." He spoke passionately, sharing his journey and the challenges he had faced as a Black author in a predominantly white industry. He recounted his confrontation with Roger Bennett, emphasizing the need for courage in the face of prejudice. "Our stories are not just ours. They belong to our communities, to our histories, and to our futures," he declared. "When we silence diverse voices, we rob the world of the richness and complexity of human experience." As he continued, Darnell could see the audience leaning in, captivated by his words. He shared anecdotes of fellow authors, highlighting their struggles and triumphs. The atmosphere in the room shifted, and he could feel the energy building as he called for action. "We must demand change within the publishing industry," Darnell asserted. "We must hold publishers accountable for the stories they choose to tell and the voices they choose to amplify. If we want a future where every writer has a place at the table, we must be willing to fight for it." The crowd erupted into applause, their enthusiasm electrifying. Darnell felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him. This was what he had fought for, a chance to inspire others and create a ripple effect of change. After the speech, Darnell was inundated with requests for interviews and collaborations. He was approached by fellow authors, eager to share their stories and join him in advocating for change. The momentum was building, and Darnell felt a renewed sense of purpose. But as he celebrated his newfound visibility, Roger Bennett was not one to be outdone. In a calculated move, he orchestrated a campaign to undermine Darnell's credibility. He reached out to influential figures in the industry, questioning Darnell's literary merit and attempting to sway public opinion against him. "It's time to put this kid in his place," Roger was overheard saying at a private event. "He's riding the wave of controversy, but we can't let him define what literature should be." Darnell caught wind of Roger's campaign through industry insiders, and while it stung, he refused to let it deter him. Instead, he took to social media, sharing his thoughts and encouraging his followers to uplift voices that had been marginalized. "We cannot allow fear to silence us," he tweeted. Our stories matter, and we will not be drowned out by those who seek to diminish our worth. The response was overwhelming. Readers and fellow authors rallied behind Darnell, sharing their own stories and experiences. His message resonated far beyond the literary community. It became a movement, a call to action for anyone who had ever felt their voice was not valued. As the weeks turned into months, Darnell's book was finally released. It was a culmination of his journey, a collection of stories that reflected the complexities of identity and the resilience of the human spirit. The launch event was packed, and Darnell felt the warmth of the crowd as he signed copies and engaged in conversations. But just as he began to feel a sense of accomplishment, the inevitable confrontation with Roger came. At a literary gala, Darnell found himself face to face with the man who had tried to undermine him. Roger's expression was a mix of disdain and arrogance, and Darnell felt a familiar surge of anger. "So you've managed to keep your head above water," Roger sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "But how long do you think you can ride this wave of controversy?" Darnell took a deep breath, refusing to let Roger's words provoke him. "Long enough to create real change, Roger. And that's something you'll never understand." Roger scoffed, but Darnell could see the uncertainty flicker in his eyes. The tables had turned, and for the first time, Roger seemed on the defensive. "You're a flash in the pan," Roger retorted, but Darnell could sense the cracks in his bravado. "Maybe, but I'd rather be a flash in the pan than a relic of a bygone era," Darnell shot back. Feeling empowered, the literary world is changing, and you can either adapt or be left behind. With that, Darnell walked away, a sense of satisfaction washing over him. He had stood up to Roger Bennett, and he wasn't afraid anymore. As the year came to a close, Darnell reflected on his journey. He had faced challenges, criticism, and doubt, but he had emerged stronger and more determined than ever. His book was thriving, and he had become a voice for change within the industry. He received countless messages from readers expressing how his stories resonated with them, how they felt seen and heard. Darnell realized that he had not only reclaimed his narrative, but had also created a space for others to do the same. At a celebratory dinner with Andre, Darnell raised his glass, a smile spreading across his face. "To resilience, to our stories, and to the power of our voices," he said, his heart full of gratitude. "And to the future," Andre added, clinking his glass against Darnell's. "You've changed the game, my friend." As the evening unfolded, Darnell felt a profound sense of accomplishment wash over him. He had not only carved out a space for himself in the literary world, but had also ignited a movement for change that would resonate for years to come. His journey was far from over, but he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with courage and conviction. "This is just the beginning," Darnell said, determination shining in his eyes. "We have so much more work to do, and together we can continue to elevate our voices." With laughter and camaraderie surrounding him, Darnell knew that he was part of something larger than himself, a collective effort to reshape narratives and ensure that every story mattered. He raised his glass once more, embracing the hope and possibilities that awaited him. You've made it to the end. If you enjoyed this story, I am confident that you'll love the next one appearing on the screen now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and please give this video a like. I'll see you in the next one.